If you're enjoying these looks at what's happening on Capitol Hill, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future episodes.
It was a busy week in Congress.
It was February 17th through the 21st.
A lot of important nominations and new bills.
Yeah. Let's start with the new faces in the cabinet.
Okay.
We had Howard Lutnick confirmed as the Secretary of Commerce.
Right.
Now his background is in finance, isn't it?
Yeah, he was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, so that's a pretty interesting move.
Yeah. How do you think that might change the Department of Commerce?
Well, it's really different to have somebody who's used to Wall Street deal-making now shaping trade policies and leading economic initiatives, so it'll be interesting to see what direction he takes things in.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll see him focusing on different types of trade deals or maybe prioritizing things in a different way.
Yeah, maybe he'll focus more on deals that directly impact American businesses or certain sectors like finance and technology.
Interesting. And we also saw Kelly Loeffler confirmed as the administrator of the Small Business Administration.
Right.
She's got experience in both the private sector and government.
Yeah, a really valuable combination for the SBA. Her background in financial services means she understands what businesses need.
Yeah.
And her time as a senator gives her insight into how the government can support them.
Makes sense.
Especially now with the economy the way it is, the SBA needs someone who gets both sides of the coin.
Now let's move on to the new FBI director.
Okay.
Kashyap Patel.
That was a close one.
Yeah, it was.
51 to 49.
Wow, that's a really close vote.
Yeah.
Suggests that people had some pretty strong feelings about him.
Absolutely. A vote like that usually means there are some concerns or differing views about the nominee.
I guess in Patel's case, it was probably because of his background as an attorney and his involvement in all those investigations.
Most likely his supporters probably saw his legal knowledge as a good thing for the FBI.
Yeah, and then his critics were maybe worried about potential biases.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how his leadership unfolds and if those concerns were justified.
Yeah, I think all eyes will be on him.
For sure.
Okay, so moving on to the budget.
Right.
The Senate passed S-Con Res 7, which is the spending plan for this fiscal year 2025.
Right, so that's like setting the blueprint before you start building a house.
Right.
It outlines the overall spending limits, and then all the committees get to work figuring out how to divide the funds.
Okay, and were there any particularly interesting amendments to the resolution?
Yes, two stand out.
Yeah.
The Sullivan Amendment and the Lee Amendment.
The Sullivan Amendment, that's the one that wants to protect funding for Medicare and Medicaid, right?
That's the one. It's a big deal with all the debates about healthcare costs.
Yeah, for sure. Those programs are really important for so many people.
They're funded through payroll taxes, premiums, and general tax revenue.
Right.
And they're constantly under pressure from rising healthcare costs and the aging population.
It seems like the Sullivan Amendment is a sign that some lawmakers want to make sure those programs don't get cut.
Absolutely. They're prioritizing healthcare for those millions of Americans.
And then the Lee Amendment.
The Lee Amendment is all about limiting the power of federal agencies.
How so?
Well, it aims to require congressional approval for any major rules that agencies want to implement.
Interesting.
It's about the balance of power between the branches of government. The people who support it are probably worried about what they see as regulatory overreach.
So agencies making big changes without enough oversight from Congress.
Exactly, and it raises the question of how much power agencies should really have.
Versus how much control Congress should keep.
That's a debate that's been going on forever.
Yeah, a fundamental question about how our government should work.
Exactly. Yeah, it could really slow things down if agencies have to go through Congress every time they want to change a rule.
Yeah, I can see that, especially in areas like environmental protection or financial regulations. Things could get bogged down pretty quickly.
Definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Definitely. And speaking of things to keep an eye on, the Senate started considering nominations for two pretty important positions.
Oh, right.
Daniel Driscoll for Secretary of the Army and Jamieson Greer for United States Trade Representative.
Big shoes to fill, for sure.
Yeah, the Secretary of the Army. That's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. Overseeing the largest branch of the military, that means a lot of influence on strategy, resource allocation, and just overall readiness.
And the U.S. Trade Representative, that's basically our top negotiator for trade deals.
Exactly. They're the ones making sure American goods and services have access to markets, that trade agreements are being followed and that we're not getting taken advantage of.
Pretty complex job.
Very complex. It requires a lot of skill and strategy, especially with global trade being so dynamic these days.
So we've got confirmations, a budget resolution nominations for key positions. What about the actual bills that were introduced this week?
Well, between the 17th and the 21st, the House introduced 48 public bills, one private bill, and two resolutions.
Okay.
And then on the 21st alone, they added another 68 public bills and 8 more resolutions.
So a lot of legislative activity.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah. Are there any that really stand out to you or that you think might generate some controversy?
Well, it's early days yet, but we can already see some trends emerging. For example, several bills deal with energy and the environment.
Not surprising, given all the talk about climate change and energy security.
Exactly. And it looks like a lot of them are trying to find that balance between producing enough energy and protecting the environment.
Which is a tough balance to strike.
Very tough. We're seeing proposals for things like incentives for renewable energy development.
Which would align with reducing emissions.
Right. And then you have bills that aim to simplify the approval process for energy projects, which could benefit both renewable and traditional energy sources.
It will be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Absolutely. Another area where we saw a lot of activity was healthcare.
Healthcare is always a hot-button issue.
Always this week, the bills cover everything from drug pricing and affordability to access to care, particularly in underserved communities.
With healthcare costs always going up. It's no wonder that so many lawmakers are focused on it.
Right. Some of these bills are trying to lower prescription drug costs.
Which is a major concern for a lot of people.
Definitely. And others are looking at expanding access to care, especially in rural areas and for the uninsured.
I also saw some bills addressing mental health services.
Yes. That's an area that often gets overlooked, but it's incredibly important.
So we've got energy and the environment, healthcare. What other areas are covered in this wave of legislation?
Well, a lot of bills focus on economic issues, things like job creation, training programs for workers, and support for small businesses. It's all about boosting the economy, right? Creating jobs, helping businesses succeed.
So some of these bills are offering tax breaks to companies that create jobs.
Right, or in specific industries or places that need a boost.
And others are focused on training programs.
Yeah, getting workers the skills they need for those in-demand jobs, kind of preparing them for the future.
And what about small businesses? Are there any bills aimed at helping them out?
Definitely a lot of them focus on giving small businesses access to funding and making regulations easier to navigate because they're so important for growth and new ideas.
It's interesting to see how these economic bills kind of connect back to some of the other things we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Like the energy and environment bills.
Right.
Those could have a big impact on the economy, too.
For sure. Like if a bill promotes renewable energy, you could see new jobs created in manufacturing and installation.
Right.
Or if it's easier to get energy projects approved, that could lead to more investment in infrastructure.
And more economic benefits.
Exactly.
So we've got bills about energy, the environment, healthcare, the economy. Are there any other big areas covered in this legislation?
Yeah, we've also got education infrastructure and national security.
Education, that's a big one. What are they looking at there?
Things like school safety, teacher shortages, making college more affordable.
All really important issues.
Yeah, they all affect students' families and ultimately the future workforce.
And what about infrastructure?
Well, a lot of the bills propose putting money into transportation, broadband, internet, water systems, things like that.
It seems like modernizing our infrastructure is pretty crucial.
It is if we want to keep the economy going, connect communities, and stay competitive globally.
Makes sense. And then there's national security.
Right.
What are the key concerns there?
Well, it's a wide range of things, really. Cybersecurity, border security, military readiness, support for veterans.
So basically making sure we're prepared for whatever comes our way.
Yeah, staying ahead of the curve.
Oh, it sounds like this was a pretty eventful week in Congress.
It was lots of confirmations and new budget resolution nominations and tons of new bills.
And even though some of these actions might seem small,
Yeah.
they can really have a big impact on our lives.
It's a constant process, this whole thing of shaping and reshaping policies, priorities, responding to what's happening, and planning for what's next.
That's a lot to keep up with.
It is, but the more informed and engaged we are, the more we can all help shape the direction of the country.
That's a great point. Well, thanks for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone for joining us for this week's look at congressional activity.
Until next time.
Stay curious.